Rain hammered against the warped wooden porch of a house that looked as tired as the woman inside. Maria sat on the floor, her back against the wall, one arm wrapped around her three little girls who huddled close as if trying to disappear into her. A purplish bruise had already begun to bloom along her cheekbone, but she didn't flinch from the pain. What hurt more were the words still ringing in her ears, sharp, venomous, and heavy with blame. Her husband's footsteps had stormed through the kitchen, the front door slamming so hard it rattled the frame. He was gone again, maybe to the bar, maybe to find someone else to blame. This time, his rage had been over something she could never change. She had given him 3 daughters and no son. In his eyes, it was her failure, and in his fists, it was her punishment. The girls didn't speak. They'd seen enough nights like this to know that silence was safest. One of them, the youngest, buried her face in her mother's torn dress, tiny fingers clutching the fabric as though holding it together might keep their lives from falling apart completely. The middle child rested her head against Maria's arm, her eyes wide and unblinking, while the eldest kept glancing toward the door as if expecting him to come back at any moment. Maria's mind raced. She thought about the times she'd stayed, believing things might change, believing love could outweigh cruelty. But tonight felt different. She felt a cold certainty creeping in. If she stayed, her daughters would grow up thinking this was normal. She pulled them closer, their small bodies trembling against her, and though she didn't yet know where they would go, she knew they couldn't stay here. Not another night. The rain hadn't stopped, and the cold had seeped deep into Maria's bones. Her thin blouse clung to her, heavy with water, while the mud sucked at her shoes with every step. The girls followed close behind, their little feet splashing through puddles, their heads bowed against the wind. Maria kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead, forcing one step after another, even though she had no clear destination, just the certainty that it had to be away from where they'd come. The roar of an approaching engine barely registered until it slowed beside them. She stiffened, instinct telling her to keep walking, but the truck matched their pace. The passenger window slid down with a squeal, and she found herself staring into the face of a man who looked as if he had lived 100 winters. His skin was weathered and lined, his gray eyes both sharp and weary, like someone who'd seen too much and carried most of it alone. Jack Turner had been driving home from town when he spotted them, 4 figures stumbling along the rain-slick road, the smallest half hidden behind the woman's legs. His gaze traveled from Maria's soaked hair to the limp in her step, then to the way the children clung to her as if she were their only shield in the world. Something in his chest tightened, a memory flickering in the back of his mind, of another night, years ago, when he had been the one lost and desperate in the rain. He didn't ask what happened or where they were going. His voice was calm, almost matter-of-fact, but carried a weight that left no room for argument. "You're coming with me," he said. Maria froze, staring at him through the rain. Something in his eyes made her believe him. Jack's truck rumbled up the long dirt driveway, headlights cutting through the mist until the shadow of a sprawling ranch house appeared. The place was wide and sturdy, with fences stretching toward the horizon and the soft glow of a porch light spilling onto the wet ground. Maria hesitated as he opened the passenger door, but the girls scrambled out, drawn toward the promise of warmth. Inside, the scent of wood smoke wrapped around them. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, sending golden light dancing across the walls. The girls moved instinctively toward it, holding out their small hands, their cheeks flushed from the sudden heat. Maria stood near the doorway, her wet shoes dripping onto the rug, unsure whether to stay or flee. Jack didn't press her. He set down his hat, moved to the kitchen, and returned with thick blankets, slices of bread, and mugs of steaming tea. He offered them without a word, the quiet between them broken only by the sound of rain ticking against the windows. Maria took the cup, the warmth seeping into her fingers. She watched him move around the room, his presence steady but strangely distant. Finally, she found her voice, soft and uncertain. "Why?" Jack stopped in mid-step, his back to her for a moment. She saw his shoulders rise and fall before he turned. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she caught a glimpse of something unspoken, a wound that had never fully healed. Because once, he said, his voice low, someone saved me, when I thought no one cared. The words lingered in the air, carrying a weight Maria didn't fully understand, but somehow, they made her chest ache in a way that felt almost like hope. Morning sunlight spilled over the rolling fields, chasing away the damp chill of the night before. The ranch, once silent except for the wind, now carried a new kind of music, the sharp, bright sound of little girls laughing. Their giggles echoed inside the barn as they darted between stalls, handing Jack handfuls of hay and watching in delight as the horses leaned down to nibble. Their tiny boots stamped playful patterns in the straw, each step a small rebellion against the fear that had shadowed them for so long. The eldest tried to copy Jack's slow, steady movements, lifting a feed bucket that was almost too heavy for her. The middle child squealed when a curious mare nudged her shoulder. Even the youngest, usually so quiet, was grinning wide enough to show the gap where a baby tooth had been lost. From the barn's open doorway, Maria stood wrapped in one of Jack's old flannel shirts, her hands gripping the fabric as if holding herself steady. The warmth of the sun on her face was almost overwhelming, but not as much as the sight before her, her children laughing without glancing over their shoulders, their eyes bright instead of wary. Her throat tightened, and tears pricked her vision. She had nearly forgotten what it felt like to see joy without fear standing behind it. Jack glanced up from where he was checking a saddle, catching her gaze across the barn. For a long moment, neither spoke. But in his eyes, she saw something more than kindness. A quiet admission that this wasn't about charity. It was about two kinds of saving happening at once. She was protecting her daughters from a life of pain, and Jack was protecting himself from the kind of loneliness that could hollow a man out completely. Weeks passed, and the sharp edges of Maria's pain began to dull. The bruises that once marked her face had faded to the faintest traces, almost invisible beneath the healthier color in her cheeks. The girls had grown bolder, their laughter a regular part of the ranch's rhythm, mingling with the low nickers of the horses and the creak of the windmill. That evening, the scent of stew filled the kitchen, rich and comforting. Jack moved quietly, ladling the thick mixture into 4 deep bowls. The fire in the hearth popped and cracked, casting a warm light over the worn wooden table. He set the bowls down, one for each of the girls, one for Maria, and then finally took his own seat. Maria glanced at him, a question in her eyes, but before she could speak, he broke the silence. "This is your home now." The words were plain, without ceremony, but they carried a weight that landed deep in her chest. Her hand trembled as she set down her spoon and reached across the table. When his rough, calloused fingers met hers, it wasn't a romantic gesture, but something steadier, an unspoken vow. Gratitude, safety, and the quiet certainty that she no longer had to fight this world alone. The girls ate eagerly, their chatter filling the room, their small voices so at ease it was as if they had always belonged here. Under the glow of the kitchen light, the lines between them blurred. The lonely rancher, the beaten mother, and her 3 daughters were no longer defined by the past that had broken them. They were something else now. Not strangers. Not guests. A family.